Bernie Madoff, do you remember him, the Ponzi scheme artist extraordinaire? Well, he was thrown in jail for the better part of 150 years. He wants that sentence reduced. Some help from the President of the United States. No word what the White House is going to do. No long how long this request has been in there to former Justice Department official James Trusty. Jim, good to see you.
You too.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think Bernie's going to need about 10 Kim Kardashians to make this work. I mean, I don't really see him as being the poster child for criminal justice reform. There's a lot of bipartisan approaches right now to trying to lessen some of the federal sentencing guidelines, to try to help some people out that are nonviolent offenders. But Bernie is literally the poster child for deception and fraud and victimization, mass victimization. So I think his chances are pretty remote.
That's a Hail Mary pass, right, essentially?
Maybe about 3 or 4 that they have to do,
right.
Pull it out.
Let me separately go to another issue today. Knowing you were coming, Attorney General Barr has ordered the reinstatement of the federal death penalty, I guess the first time in close to 20 years. What will that mean? Can he just issue that on his own? How does that go?
Yeah, he can. What's happened is really kind of a pocket veto. The Attorney General is responsible for something called the Capital Procedure Protocol or Death Penalty Protocol. And really what it's been held up with for years is the Attorney General has to designate essentially the cocktail of drugs that are going to be used to carry out executions. And that's been a real litigious area where defense attorneys and even companies have stopped distributing certain types of drugs used for federal executions. There's been all this kind of science-based fighting about whether people feel pain and suffering, whether this manufacturer can distribute the drug in the United States. That has all somewhat cleared up. And the Attorney General has just issued this paperwork that basically says we can go back to doing executions. Now, I don't expect hundreds or dozens or any huge number, but it is something that literally was sat on by 2 preceding Attorney Generals with inaction. They just refused to touch it, which effectively shut down the death penalty.
But various states have death penalties, right?
Right. States are all over the place, and they change. But federally, there's been a death penalty for some time. There's you have to work hard to get the death penalty in the federal system. It's the Boston Marathon bombers. It's the World Trade Center 1 type guys. And the 5 that will be the first in the queue, so to speak, are, if you look at the underlying facts, they're horrific. I mean, whatever your feelings are about death penalty versus life in prison, these are guys that killed children, that killed people in very brutal ways, killed elderly, killed witnesses. They really kind of touch the nerve of why you might want to have a death penalty.
Let me switch gears while I have you here as well. Your thoughts on the whole Mueller thing yesterday?
Well, look, I don't get any joy out of pointing out kind of the weakness of the presentation. I don't think that really matters all that much. I mean, Mueller was certainly not engaging in reverse psychology when he said, I don't want to do this. Yeah. He came in, he spent 6 hours on the chair. It was halting. It was difficult. There were fundamental moments like Fusion GPS where you thought, man, how does he not know these things? But what I
think, I don't want to be sinister about it. He's an honorable man and a hero, but that he didn't know, or that he was trying to just avoid the question by pretending he didn't.
I don't think he was being duplicitous. I think I give him the same benefit of the doubt. He's an honorable guy with a long history of public service. I think what it shows is, more practically, if you're going to try to drill down and figure out how did this thing get started, what's going on with the hiring, what's going on with the FISA court, with Christopher Steele's usage, you're not going to get it from him. He was kind of a delegator. He was somebody that was fairly aloof to it, maybe too aloof to the investigation.
Well, the other thing that's surprising was the letter that was sent eventually to Attorney General Barr on mischaracterizing, that wasn't even sent by him. That was sent obviously by a staffer, and he couldn't even remember.
Right. Well, that was one moment that I didn't think was that great, where he says the letter speaks for itself. And I've seen the letter. It's like, no, it really doesn't. No, it just says we have a problem. And so I think he's got a lot of loyalty towards the people on that team.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But how would you check their party affiliation? You can't do that, right? So he obviously had a cabal of people that the Republicans tell it who were dead set against the president and out to get him.
Right. Well, let me just say, there's a few people on that team that I've known for years that I would absolutely have on that team. They're aggressive, good prosecutors or good appellate people that make a lot of sense. I think there was a delegation. I don't think Mueller did most of the picking here. I think that probably Andrew Weissman, his deputy, did. And if you were doing it right, recognizing 2 incredibly sensitive public corruption probes, you wouldn't violate the Hatch Act. You wouldn't say, hey, what's your party? How long have you been a Democrat? How long have you been a Republican? But you could ask them questions about conflicts. Hey, I'm doing my due diligence. Have you ever represented somebody who might be connected to the Hillary Rodham Clinton campaign? Well, that would give you Jeannie Rhee in a heartbeat, right? I mean, somebody who actually defended Clinton Foundation.
Without asking him an out, right? Where
right, or, or have you made donations? I think that could be fair game, too, because, again, there's a lot of career prosecutors that work for the government, don't have a lot of money to sprinkle around on campaign candidates, that aren't going to celebration parties for campaigns. You could find a lot of people that didn't bring that baggage, so it was always kind of an unforced error by the Mueller team to have so much obvious bias in their backgrounds.
The proof of the pudding might be the fact that we're in a new wave of Democrats storming the microphones today to say the impeachment thing goes on, we're not going to let go. It was at 90-95. It's still around 90-95.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's political hay to be made, right? There's always going to be facts in that report that will give people who are inclined to do it some argument that
they're mentioning the perjure
thing
today, that he perjured himself and answered to written questions and other stuff.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I know there was kind of a sloppy answer at one point by Mueller that seemed to suggest that there was dishonesty in those answers. But look, if you get to a point where you're letting the president send in written answers with his team of lawyers, it's unlikely that he's going to say something that's just flat out perjurious or provably perjurious. Right. So, again, they had to dig up something. There was no real headline that came out of it. That was at least a nugget that people can play with if they want to keep it alive. But I think a lot of people are maybe interested, like I am, in the prequel, like how did we get here?
How did we get here?
But not so much the current movie. The movie's kind of over.
Well, the one thing I did take on, I know I'm going along here, but you're very good and you're helping me with a lot of stuff, is it morphed by the end of the interview back and forth within the House Intelligence Committee, not whether the president done something illegal, but whether it was untoward or unethical or not befitting a president. So it had already ratcheted down from what it was originally supposed to be.
Right. Well, there's the old saying, the law condemns much the law permits much which wisdom condemns as folly. And it basically means, look, you can have a president who's doing, non-disclosure agreements with porn stars, and you may think that's really ugly and embarrassing, but it doesn't mean it's something that's illegal. And I think to get into kind of the ethics of this probe when the facts have been known this long is a little bit of a Hail Mary, too. I mean, the legal part's been determined. I think most of America is like, we've heard this verdict, let's move past it. But obviously there's a political interest in keeping it alive in some quarters.
Everyone sees things through their prism, on the left or right, and so you have to argue, does anything move as a result of what was said yesterday? And people with the prison, they hate the president. It didn't move any of them off that. Those who love the president didn't move anything off that.
Right. And within 2 days, there'll be some tweet or something else that completely distracts us from it, right?
All right. Thank you. Jim Trusty, the former Justice Department official, a good read on us, knows a lot of the principal players here.